I think Haley's big impact on politics, besides being married to Marcia for so many years and having a real life partner, is that he's taught everybody that policy goes with politics. And there are dozens, hundreds of operatives around the country right now in campaigns that are saying to themselves when faced with a dilemma, what would Haley do in this situation? And I really think that's the impact he's had on generations of Republican operatives.
But he not only was able to give great advice to candidates, but become a successful one himself, not only able to give sound counsel to office holders at all levels, but to become an effective office holder himself.
The 63rd governor of the state of Mississippi, the chairman of the Republican National Committee, one of the nation's most respected strategists, Haley Barbour. But his story doesn't begin in Washington. It starts in Yazoo City, Mississippi.
Yeah, so Yazoo City is in the South Delta. It's the gateway to the Delta. It's where the hills and the flatlands of the Delta meet. There's no question Haley was the most political person in the family. My dad loved local politics. Haley loved it all. When my dad ran for mayor when he was 27, mayor of Yazoo City, Haley got involved in the campaign. He was a junior at Ole Miss. That's what got Haley interested in politics. And that fall, or heading into that fall, my dad mentioned to Haley, Nixon campaign's looking for field reps, and the rest is history.
Haley understood what it would take to build a Republican Party in the state of Mississippi, and he set out to do it from an early age.
Haley went from there to working for presidential campaigns, and then of course he decided to run for the Senate in 1982.
Stennis was 82 and Haley was 34. It was a good campaign, but it was early in Mississippi Republican politics. It just wasn't a good time to do it, to challenge Stennis.
Losing a Senate campaign didn't end Haley Barbour's career. It didn't even hurt it. He'd impressed Jim Baker as one of the South's top operatives, and Baker brought him to the Reagan White House.
There's an old saying, keep your friends close and your enemies closer. And in campaigning for public office, there's an addendum to that bromide. Keep the politicos even closer than that. I know this firsthand because I kept Haley Barbour as close to me as I could for as long as I could.
He brought Haley Barbour's persona to the White House. There was no question about it. We had a giant liquor cabinet. We had regular social events. Our motto was ask for forgiveness, not for permission.
And I ended up working in the last year of the Reagan administration. They would still talk about, well, Haley would say this, or Haley, I'm like, he's been gone for 5 years, but he made a big dent on everybody there. And he pretty much, makes a big mark wherever he goes.
I remember I was the head of the census, as some of you Mississippi people know, back in 1970, and it gave me a real lesson in understanding and making clear, knowing what you're doing. When it had written in there, one of the questions was number of employees broken down by sex. And this fellow scribbled in beside it, he wrote by number of employees broken down by sex. He said, none broken down by sex, but I do have two with a drinking problem.
Everybody has a favorite Haleyism. There's too many to count. I have my own. The bar is always open at BGR.
If you're ever in a hole, the first thing you need to do is to stop digging.
And Democrats were running from Bill Clinton like scalded dogs about that time.
I always liked when he would just say that something's strong as an acre of garlic.
If you sit down at the poker table and can't spot the mark, it's you.
I mean, here's a guy that can spend $100 million of his own money on this election. I mean, that's enough money to burn a wet mule.
Looks at him, he goes, I taught this boy everything he knows, but I didn't teach him everything I know.
There's no such thing as a bad short speech.
He became political director at the White House under Reagan, and obviously met all sorts of people, and that's just sort of when he got the full-on Potomac fever.
When I left the Bush White House, we started Barbour and Rogers, attorneys at law. It didn't take us long to figure out we weren't very good lawyers. Then we figured out we're not really lawyers at all. So we were just going to do this consulting, lobbying gig until we figured out what we were really going to do with our lives. And that was 32 years ago.
I've been at BGR for almost 21 years now. When Haley gets on a roll, his clients look at him in awe. He's a political genius. He's funny. He's affable. And all of our clients really do hang on every word that he says, and for good reason.
We like to say it's a good thing that we founded this firm because the people that work there would never hire us.
But building a successful government relations firm in D.C. wasn't enough for Haley Barbour. After Bill Clinton won the White House in 1992, Haley set out to rebuild the entire Republican Party.
You may know in that 1993 chairman's race, he won on the third ballot against two other men that went on to both serve in the U.S. Senate.
Haley's attitude was, this thing's over. Beating these guys isn't going to be any problem. And of course, he was right.
When Haley Barbour became chairman of the party, I remember as a young operative watching them put a TV studio in the basement of the RNC. And they created this product that ran on national television called GOP TV. And of course, their anchorman for this Republican newscast was this guy with a southern drawl named Haley Barbour.
Good evening, I'm Haley Barbour. Welcome to GOP TV's Rising Tide.
And it was a revolutionary thing at the time, but Haley's always kind of been ahead of his time.
The Republican National Committee is very proud to support the Republican contract with America.
Haley Barbour was the one who sat down with Newt Gingrich and said, I will make sure as National Republican Chairman that it gets paid for. And that's how the contract with America came to be.
So recruiting candidates was very important and giving them something to say. The contract with America was key. It was 10 really good ideas, and our point to candidates was just pick 2 or 3. All you need is 2 or 3 and go run on them. And it was part of the success of Newt becoming Speaker and really changing the direction of the party.
Not a single Republican incumbent in the House, in the Senate, or governor was defeated yesterday.
Haley Barbour is one of the smartest politicians I've ever met. We've known each other now going back to the 1980s. I've always admired his work. He was a key, absolute key, to our becoming a majority in 1994. He's been remarkable as a party leader, as a governor, as somebody who really thinks deeply about and loves the future of America, and thinks it's important that we work together.
There was no incumbent Republican in the U.S. House of Representatives that had ever served in the majority. The closest we had was someone who had served as a page during the last years of the Republican majority.
Either everybody's going to have to calm down or we'll close the bar. You've got every right to have just as much fun because this is as great a night as I've seen in Washington. And I will tell you the lasting effects of this and what's about to happen will be even greater for our country and for our children's future.
There's something about Haley that distinguished him from many of the others. Very few have been able to navigate at the intersection of politics and policy as effectively as Haley. As evidence of that, look no further than his legacy as a 2-term governor of Mississippi. His opponents quickly learned that though he may have a voice as smooth as Southern bourbon, he's as tough as Mississippi hardwood.
Haley decided he wanted to run for governor in 2003 and take on Ronnie Musgrove. He saw Musgrove as weak. He wanted to give, quote, strong leadership a chance. That was kind of Haley's pitch. The Musgrove campaign was essentially all negative for about 6 weeks in the fall, where they tried to turn Haley into somebody from DC, from out of state, who doesn't know us. Meanwhile, Haley's talking like this, and it was a huge hit.
You never got the one-up on Haley Barbour.
In the poll we did in the days after the election in 2003, there was a shockingly high number of people who said that the reason they voted for Haley is because they'd met him. It was physically impossible for the number of people who said that they'd met Haley in 2003 to have actually done so. But I think that spoke to the type of campaign he ran, and it was his campaign.
When Haley ran for office in 2003 and won the governorship, everybody knew he was going to be great politically. Everybody knew he was going to be a great politician. What Hurricane Katrina did a year and a half into his tenure is it showed everyone what kind of a leader Haley Barbour was.
You know, many have said that Haley being the governor of Mississippi in that moment was divine intervention. I believe that myself. I saw it with my own eyes. All those relationships he had developed as a lobbyist, his deep knowledge of how to get people aligned in Washington around a goal. It all came to fruition.
But the truth of the matter is, the person who deserves the biggest compliment in my judgment is the man who brought the will of the Mississippi people, the needs of the Mississippi people up to Washington, D.C. and fashioned one heck of a piece of legislation for the people of this important state. Thank you, Governor, for your hard work.
You know, now that he is, post-governor, he likes to just say it's political recreation. That's what he does for a living, whatever that is.
For all his many accomplishments, party chairman, advisor, and office holder himself, I hope we never overlook what may be Haley's greatest achievement. As fierce a competitor as he was, I think his humor and goodwill left him on good terms with friend and foe alike. I hope tonight we're at least in part honoring that, along with his many indisputable accomplishments. And my only question for the selection panel is, what took y'all so long?